Hi everyone. Let's take 5 minutes to think about life, God, and the Bible. Somehow, as they were celebrating the Passover meal, now known to us as the Last Supper, Jesus knew that Judas was going to betray him. In fact, Matthew records this conversation between Jesus and Judas at that supper. Jesus said that things will go bad for the man who betrays him. It would be better for him if he had not been born. Then Judas, the one who would betray Jesus, said, "Surely you don't mean me, Rabbi?" Jesus answered, "You have said so." Matthew 26, verse 25. Jesus knew that Judas was going to betray him. Then Jesus proceeds to make these famous words at that Passover meal. While they were eating, Jesus took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat. This is my body." Then he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." Matthew 26, 26-27. Jesus is clear about the meal. We use his words today when we celebrate communion or the Lord's Supper. The bread represents Jesus' body, the cup represents Jesus' blood. Jesus gives his body and blood so that we can experience the forgiveness of sins. This leads us to the second thing Jesus knew that night. Jesus knew that he would give himself, body and blood, for the forgiveness of sins. Matthew later tells us that Judas regrets his decision to betray Jesus and returns the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests. "I have sinned," he said, "for I have betrayed innocent blood." "What is that to us?" they replied. "That's your responsibility." So Judas threw the money into the temple and left. Then he went away and hanged himself. Matthew 27, verses 4-5. What would Jesus have done if he had met Judas at his moment of regret? Remember, Jesus at the Last Supper said that he gives his body and blood for the forgiveness of sins. I believe that Jesus would have forgiven Judas. The LaGuardia Airport is in New York. It is named after a famous mayor in New York named Fiorello LaGuardia. One winter's night in 1935, it is told, Fiorello LaGuardia showed up at a night court in the poorest ward of the city. He dismissed the judge for the evening and took over the bench. That night, a tattered old woman charged with stealing a loaf of bread was brought before him. She defended herself by saying, "My daughter's husband has deserted her. She is sick and her children are starving." The shopkeeper refused to drop the charges. LaGuardia sighed. He turned to the old woman and said, "I've got to punish you. The law makes no exceptions. $10 or 10 days in jail." However, even while pronouncing sentence, LaGuardia reached into his pocket, took out a $10 bill, and threw it into his head with these words, "Here's the $10 fine, which I now remit." As the judge himself, LaGuardia paid the fine of the woman. During this time of isolation and loneliness, some people wonder if the forgiveness of God is real. This is when I remember Jesus' words at the Last Supper. The bread represents Jesus' body, the cup represents Jesus' blood. Jesus gives his body and blood so that we can experience the forgiveness of sins. I believe that through Jesus, God takes his $10 bill out of his pocket and pays our fine. Through Jesus, God says, "I forgive you." Then he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins."